My name is Bernice Asante, and let's get right into it. So, you are here to learn the tricks and the trade of what it entails in being a resident assistant and a resident director. From this training, you should expect to be familiar with these three objectives, which we're going to go through. The first is recognizing barriers in communication, which are linked to cultural and diversity. The second objective is learning how to interact with high and low context cultural backgrounds in the context of culture and diversity. And the third objective is being able to analyze body language, such as linguistic language and paralanguage. So, what is the purpose of this training? The purpose of this training is to equip you potential resident assistant and resident directors with the knowledge in how to incorporate culture and diversity within the ethical framework of your job fulfillments. During this training, we will primarily focus on our...
Excuse me, please. I thought we were coming here to discuss something else. We've had a lot of trainings on this particular issue, and I thought we were going to be coming to learn something new. Yeah.
Well, before this class started, I identified the objectives that you're going to pick from this course, and if they are not applicable with what you are expecting, frankly, I don't believe this training is for you, and as polite as kids can say, I think you're free to go if it doesn't facilitate your needs.
Maybe we'll stay, maybe because of refreshing one's memory. I kept thinking we're going to be making progress and learning some new stuff because we've been doing this like over and over.
So I suggest that you stay and you see how the course goes, and then you can gauge if it applies to what you have in mind of what you want to gain from this training. So we are now on the purpose of training, where we're going to touch on three objectives. One objective is recognizing barriers in communications. The other one is learning how to interact with high and low contextual cultural backgrounds. And the other is being able to analyze body language and paralanguage within a culture and diversity context. But today we are going to particularly focus on the integration of high and low context culture within a cultural and diversity context. During this session, if you would like to ask questions, please leave it for the end, where we will have the floor open to questions. So basically, before you start this course, you need to understand what an RA and an RD stand for. An RA is a resident assistant, and an RD is a resident director. Their jobs are almost similar, but the resident director is above the assistant, whereas the resident assistant reports the director. So some of the roles include enforcing policies within the residential areas, mediating conflicts, and developing community development to integrate and push for community-based activities. In applying for this job, you'll also need to acquire some skill-based competencies. One of them is community development. With the community development, you will have the ability to create systems and opportunities for students in the residential area to engage. This means conducting activities such as cookouts, athletic events, and just chill time, so people are able to get to know each other and build a sense of that communal environment. The second is conflict and crisis management. So, with this skill-based competency, you should be able to react to certain conflicts that happen within the residential areas, and you should be adept in coming up with systems and methods in how to solve them. The third and last skill-based competency is inclusivity, which ties into cultural and diversity within this context. Inclusivity focuses on accommodating and advocating for minorities within the community and encouraging them to come out and experience a sense of community within the residential halls, and also to integrate them within the American culture of which this university is based in. Now we're going to focus on high and low context cultures. Primarily, a high context culture are communities which communicate through non-verbal cues, and they are non-confrontational, so their language is very vague. And the opposite is low context cultures, who are more confrontational and are direct and are more individualistic. The high context culture are more of a collective culture, where they tend to rely on groups and collaboration, whereas the low context culture rely on themselves, where they're independent. A quick example of a high context situation is a conversation between an employer and an employee. An employer will say, please can you give me that thing? And the employee will say, what thing are you talking about? And the employer will, in frustration, will say, you already know what I'm talking about. You know, come on, do what I said. And still lacking the understanding, the employee will say, I don't understand what you're saying. And as a result, the employer will get frustrated and just say, oh, I'll just do it myself. You don't really understand what I'm saying. That's a high context culture situation. The opposite is a low context culture situation. Well, the employer will simply just say, give me the book, and the employee would get the book. It's direct and it cuts no corners. So we talked about interaction, and we talked about association of both low and context cultures. And a thing about the high context culture, they tend to always stay together. I mean, even at events, they'll always, you know, group together and move together, whereas the low context people, you'll just see them, you know, being on their own, comfortable in their independence. It's time for a little activity, which I would like to incorporate. So I'm going to hand out these cards to everybody here, and you are not to look at the back or the front. As soon as I give it to you, you will just put it on your forehead. Now, when everybody's card is on their forehead, you will try, when you look at someone and they have, for example, individualistic, you will see that's a low context cultured behavior, so you will try and act it out to them. So as a participant, you have to try and guess what card you are holding. Are you either a high context or a low context? You're just basically looking to see if you're a high context card or a low context card. Not specifically the behavior, but rather the context card. So I will hand them out. And as soon as I hand them out to you, you will just put them on your head. Now I will give you 2 minutes to interact with each other and try and find out what context you are in, and then after that we will come together and I'll ask you what you are and you'll flip your cards to see. don't tell them what their card is. You have to act it out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Give me that book. Please.
And your time is up. Your time is up. I think you have a sense of what. Few seconds here. Few seconds here. Okay, let's conclude. Let's conclude. Thank you.
Yes.
I will now go around and quickly you will just tell me what you think you are and flip your card. So, do you think you're high or low context?
Low context.
Flip your card. You're a high context. Do you think you're high or low context?
Low context.
Let's see, flip your card. Oh, you're correct. 1 point for you. Do you think you're high or low context?
I think I'm low.
Let's see. Do you think you're high or low context?
Low.
Let's see your. Oh, wow. Good job. Do you think you're high or low context?
High.
What are you?
High context.
Oh, congrats. Do you think you're high or low context?
Low?
Let's see your card.
Yeah, low.
Oh, wow. Congrats. Now, last person. Do you think you're high or low context? Let's see your card. Oh, congrats. So now you get a sense of the differences between high and low contexts. So as you become an RE and RD, keep these in mind as you will have different, focus back, focus back, focus back. Excuse me? Focus back, thank you. So now as you fulfill your positions as an RA and an RD, you should keep in mind the definitions of high context and low context, as you will have students who portray these behaviors and you'll be able to identify and accommodate them appropriately. Now we're going to transition to communication barriers. As we know, I think every one of us has been in a conflict with someone. Yes? Yes? Yes. Yeah. And most of these conflicts have roots. So the first is language. When you can't understand what someone is saying, there is room for interpretation and ambiguity, and their conflict is born. Then you have cultural beliefs and values. People may believe in different deities, some may believe in different structures and systems, political systems, and these differences can cause rifts in relationships. So this is one of the barriers. Third is body language. Let's use the example of East and West Africa. There is a notion that East Africans are very calm and relaxed, and West Africans on the other side are tough, and they know what they're dominant. So when these two communities clash, they can be a communication, misinterpretation, and their conflict is born, and they're barriers. And the last one is stereotypes. I think we all know about stereotypes. Sometimes we say Ghanaians like eating egg. That's not particularly true. I mean, we say Nigerians, they love money. That's a stereotype. That's not particularly true. We say Gambians maybe are very calm and relaxed. Maybe that's not particularly true, but these stereotypes, when we integrate them in communication, can create conflict. And this is where barriers come in. So, let's wrap up the session. What did we talk about? We talked about cultural and diversity training and why it's needed for this position. We talked about the barriers that come with cultural communications. We talked about how to solve these barriers and the importance of high and low cultural communities. So now we are going to conduct an assessment test to see how much information you have retained during this training. Okay, so this game is called Jeopardy! You will be in the group that I assigned you to, and you will have chances to earn points for your team. Okay, we will start with the first team. Who is going to answer? Okay. Now, what would you like to choose? What would you like to pick?
High context.
High context?
1,000.
Now, your question is, name one solution to a high context communication barrier.
Some form. Compromise, negotiation.
Are you sure? Is that your last answer?
Yes, of course.
You are correct. Okay, team 2, who is answering? Okay, Mr. Desiree, would you please pick?
Yes, low context. And I'll go for 800.
Wow, bold of you. 1, 2, 3. Name one example of how low context cultures, groups interact.
They are individualistic. And they are straight to the point.
Congratulations.
Check on those.
Who's answering the question here? Mr. Brice? Okay. Would you please pick one?
Resident assistant.
What number?
1,000. What is it?
What is the educational requirement of both the RA and the RD?
Can I answer it?
A degree? University degree?
For what?
Sorry?
Okay, the RA, what are their qualifications? What qualifications do they need in an RA position?
RA?
Yeah.
A bachelor's degree?
Okay.
Director?
What is their educational requirement for the director?
Minimum of masters.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that your final answer?
As best as I can recall, yes.
Congratulations, you earned $1,000 for your team. Is that your final answer?
It is.
Unfortunately, that's incorrect.
With the first ones to be loose and away from it.
Okay. Name 2 characteristics of a high context cultural group.
They don't communicate directly.
And your second was?
They use other languages which is not really clear. And then the second one is that they are group oriented. They move in groups.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
Yes.
Congratulations, you won 400. So that was for 400. So you are the crowned winners of this activity. Now it's time for feedback and questions. I, as a facilitator, will give back my feedback. I think that you did well as participants, but I would have liked to see more participation. I saw some participation from this side and this side, but I would love to see more participation and more engagement. That's from my end. But overall, I think you are an amazing audience, and thank you for coming and participating. The floor comes to you.
I only have one question.
Yes.
We learned a lot about high and low level context,
Yes.
and I really see how it is a little bit hard for RA or RD
Yes.
to identify students in the community or in the residence
Right.
or who are struggling to accommodate themselves with or to cope with the environment.
Right.
How do they identify the struggling students? Because I saw it in one of the slides, and I would like to have much light on that.
That's an excellent question. Now, in a normal resident dorm, there are 8 floors, and each floor has a designated RA to manage the floor. Now, every week to 2 weeks, RAs would go into rooms and have one-on-one sessions with each of the residents living inside the dorms. So through these one-on-one interactions, they'll be able to gauge and analyze the kind of struggles they're struggling with within the community.
Yeah, congratulations. We were able to catch the main points as stated at the beginning. My only concern is about, like, we've seen concepts.
Yes.
Of low culture.
Yes.
Low, is it low culture?
Low and high.
Low and high.
Yes.
Yeah, we understand what is it.
Yes.
But now we would like to know the background of those concepts, like authorities, scholars. How did they come up with these groupings? And is it not also a way of, how do you say it, categorizing in like 2 direction groups, while the intermediate one might not be, or the mixed one? I just want to understand first the sources, authorities, like which study were made, which are the researchers, the books, which, how do you call it, which science is it drawn from? And the second question is that is
Two extremes.
two extremes, yes. Where is the intermediate?
Reflect what
Thank you. Yeah. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
That's actually a great question. Now, your first question was on the authorities of these theories. In the study of sociology, they study the theories of human interaction and how people communicate and collaborate with each other. Through these theories, the founding fathers of sociology created systems in which categorize individuals into their behaviors and how they function within society. Let me give you an example. You have people who are introverts and you have people who are extroverts. Now they are divisive because they have labels. If you put them together in a working context with the same systems and the same group collaborations, you will not get effective work because one group functions differently than the other. It's just how we were made. So in this system, you have low context culture people who are very confrontational, and you have high context cultural individuals who are less confrontational. So once you are creating a group and you know how each person behaves in a system or an organization, you can kind of shift it around to maximize your productivity and effectiveness in an organization setting, as well as the resident assistant and resident director setting. So I hope that answers your question. So at the beginning of the training, I passed out an assessment worksheet where you can answer to the best of your ability. And after you are done, please pass them to the front and I will collect them. Other than that, thank you so much for your participation and contribution to this training, and I hope that these methods and systems will help you in fulfilling your role as a resident assistant and director in your future.